Welcome. This is our first event here in 2.5 years, and we have missed it. We have an outstanding initiation tonight, and that is our speaker, OM-C Parkin. He is the author, and this is the book that he'll be talking about tonight, Intelligence of Awakening. He's also the author of The Birth of the Lion, Non-Duality as a Way of Life, and that is the book I first read. And The Digital Age, A Critical View from a Wisdom Perspective. Stuart and I have now had 3 conversations with Om, 2 via Zoom prior to this trip to America, but also one just today, just this afternoon. And I can say without hesitation that OM-C Parkin is uncompromising in his promotion of an Advaita non-dual perspective. And that is something I value, because it is rare to find someone who is unafraid to say how he sees things without regard for consequences. Most of us pay attention to consequences an awful lot. And Om has developed the capacity not to go there. So that's a summary of the treat that I wish you to enjoy tonight.
Good evening and welcome. So we came all the way from Germany just to have this talk in this little bookstore. I hope you appreciate that. So let me just give a few words of introduction of how this is going to work tonight. I'm going to read a few passages from this book. It's a book it's a study book. It's not a book you can read. It's a book you have to study. So this is the difference that I point out to my own students, that reading a book and studying a book is not the same. So, you know, the concept of studying is a concept for the serious seeker. So it means that you have to assimilate what you read and take it or include it in your own process of self-exploration. It's not just a question of mental understanding. So if I read passages of this book, there is always the seduction to mentally understand, rather than just receiving. And if the mind doesn't understand something, then just don't bother and just let me continue, okay? Intellectual understanding in itself is not an obstacle. But I talked today in an interview with Robin Stewart about this topic. You know, that the mental understanding can be a big obstacle, but it can also serve and lead a person deeper. It depends on what I called the pure intention. So if the intention is just to accumulate second-hand knowledge, then this is not what we call a pure intention on the inner path. So if you have a pure intention of really knowing truth, then even intellectual knowledge, intellectual, spiritual knowledge can serve and even take you deeper, you know. So it's a question of listening in a way that is paradoxically not knowing. So you can just receive, and of course after I have read a passage, then I will open and you can ask questions. We could have a dialogue, then I will read the next passage. So the concept of this book called The Intelligence of Awakening, not all of my books are translated in English, but this one is one of the few ones that has been translated. And the concept of this book is to present the pillars of the inner path, of the teachings of the wisdom teachings of the inner path. So we don't know how much time we will have, but I'm going to emphasize two pillars tonight. The first one is the concept of what we call the mind. So what is the mind? And I will read a couple of pages from this chapter, and then we will have time for the second pillar, which is dedicated to the concept of suffering. Suffering in the eternal wisdom is not a negative concept which we have to avoid like an ordinary person would think. Suffering is a much broader understanding in the wisdom teachings, and is not the same as an ordinary person thinks what suffering is. So it's a very important concept in the wisdom teachings. And if we still have time, maybe not, I don't know, we will have some short passages from the third pillar, which is dedicated to spiritual teachers on the path. So this chapter is called The Mind, a Phantom. What is interesting, and what I can say as an introduction, is you see that in the German language, the term mind and the term ghost have the same word, you see. So ghost and mind in German is just one word. So Of course, in the English translation, it's inadequate to translate mind as ghost. So here we are talking about phantom. Ah, here comes the Master. I have need of thee. From the spirits that I called, Sir, deliver me. Thus spoke Goethe's desperate sorcerer's apprentice in his hour of inner distress, expressing his inner suffering, its human condition, a condition which afflicts all of humanity, the conditio humana, inescapably encompassing all human beings, so deeply penetrated and widely permeated that it seems part of our very nature. We humans are all being haunted by our own minds. Yet the great majority of us is clueless and does not notice that a foreign power has crept inside us, a power that claims to be I, but is not the real I. We speak quite naturally about our mind, but don't realize that it is just our thinking mind. We might as well call it my phantom. We live in our own mind-created world, thinking that it is life itself and calling it my life. This world of the thinking mind is our familiar world as it had been lived by our forefathers, passed on by their ancestors. An endless chain of transmission of this mind, which is for the most part nothing more than a collection of ideas and concepts already thought by others. Always dressed up differently. Very few were moved to engage in inner exploration, to try to get to the bottom of this thinking mind. Getting to the bottom of this thinking mind means questioning the entire world. For the world, or what we call world, is the thinking mind. Questioning everything I know and everything I have ever been taught. Not in the last 30 or 50 years, but in the last 4,000 years and beyond. Who is this phantom that makes me aware of my limited, transitory life that will end in death? Who is this phantom in which all the cares and sorrows of my life take place, but also all my joys and pleasures? And who is this phantom that can camouflage itself so cleverly that it remains undiscovered by us humans? It has given itself a name, which each of us thinks is our own, and this name is I. More precisely, it is the thought of I, being thought by an alleged thinker by the name of I. I actually stands for the most personal, the most intimate, the nearest, innermost location in a person, the subject itself. Is there a place that could be closer to us than I? I is my home, where I live, the core of my being. It's the opposite of strange, of foreign. Can there be any other place where we could feel better? And yet, is everyone who raises an inner voice saying I, really and truly I? Is there anybody at all who, raising a voice from inside and introducing themselves with the name of I, actually is I? See, this is the beginning of the book. And of course, at this beginning, already, the one and major question, we could call it the one and only, the final question for seekers of truth, is being announced. It's the question of who is I. And of course, it is the most simple and it's the most difficult question a human being can get. We know that very few human beings have finally and completely found the answer to this question. As, of course, who can answer this question, you see? I mean, if we put this question to the mind itself, the mind will give lots of questions, but this is where kind of the paradox is happening, because we're talking here about the necessity to find, to discern true I and false I. It said here, not everybody who says I in the inner space of a human being in consciousness, everybody who calls himself I is not necessarily I. You see, if just every thought refers to I and begins with I, even the you thought or the us thought is finally going back to the I. So it's the most essential thing. And when we want to get to radically to the source of ignorance of the human being, then we should finally dedicate ourselves to this question. Many people on this spiritual path are dealing with many other things. You see, there are lots of things you can deal with, but if you're interested to find truth, the truth of who you are, then you have to deal with this question. So, yeah, we could say at the beginning we're talking about two questions. You know, it's the question of who am I, and it's the question of who am I not. While one's gaze is forever turned outward to find the not I, the other, the foreign, and keep a suspicious eye on it, it would occur to very few that something which is truly foreign to one's nature could be living inside of themselves and not outside, that it could conceal itself in the thought of I and in the conceptual worlds which this thought gives rise to. What if the non-I were concealed inside instead of outside? What if it were hiding in the only place that I didn't suspect because I thought that it was me, myself? What if the non-I were to say I? You know that the ordinary consciousness of a simple human being is that there is a me, and if I want to point to this me, give the hand a direction, I would say like this is me, you see, and then there is another, the other, this is you, or it's them, you know, it's God up in the sky. So then God is the other people are the others, the foreigners. They can come near sometimes, and we have a nice we feeling. We feel like friends, but they remain the others. So this is putting up, you know, from a radical inner view, this is putting the question, could it be that the non-I, meaning what seems like me but is not me, is not the outside, the other person, but could be inside. What I call inside. You see what I mean? It could happen that it's not really outside. It could seem like inside. Because, I mean, saying this in a practical way, if you have an I thought arising in your mind, then this I thought is identified as I and me. And the statement here is that this is not necessarily the case, you see. For a simple person, for an ordinary person, for the masses of the people, it's very self-evident that when there is an I thought beginning with I, it's me, you know, it means me. I have an opinion, for example, you know, it's my opinion. I believe that. So all this is I and me. But the wisdom teachings say that this is not necessarily the case, that you have to start. It's not that simple, you know, that every I thought is I. So we have to start a process of self-investigation. So the last question that has been put up here was, what if the non-I were to say I? So the non-I could also call himself I. Ramana Maharshi, the great Indian sage of the last century, used the image of a thief disguised as a policeman who knows how to deflect attention from himself by screaming, "Stop the thief!" You know, stop the thief out there. Stop the thief, while pointing away with his finger. And so the whole gang goes running after an external thief. And in fact, they find him. Yes, it is the so-called other. Not just once, but time and again, it is an other. But do they have the right thief? Question mark. It makes sense, and it's quite obvious that, you know, an inner person seeking for truth, gaining the power of discrimination to discriminate I and non-I inside is not violating other people because of their skin color, or they just belong to a different or some, because this whole this problem, you know, of violence against, or abuse against the so-called other is actually just well, if we put it neutrally, it's a big misunderstanding. It's a limited understanding. You know, this is happening through people who are looking for the enemy, who are looking for the other, who are looking for the non-I in the false place. Well, this is the simple understanding, you know. So we would have a much better life, much better being together if people were looking for the false I inside rather than outside. The knowledge that humans are possessed by a phantom, or by several of those, originates in earlier pre-rational societies dominated by magical thinking. But it seems, in our modern Western society, which has long since gone through the age of enlightenment and discovered what Kant called the pure reason, at first glance to be outdated, naive, or just plain crazy. Sensible, enlightened contemporaries tend to smile condescendingly. Oh, my dear, I cannot read my own book, you know, because my English is not quite sufficient to read this translation. Condescendingly at the exorcism efforts of the healers, priests, and conjurers of primitive societies. Thus, for example, shamans, Indian healers in a trance state cast out evil spirits in sick people. Even Christianity has a long tradition of exorcism. A recent spectacular incident in Germany with a fatal outcome dates back to 1976. This is just a remark that is saying that really the last Christian exorcism, it's not long ago, happened in 1976. See, this woman died, by the way. Jesus himself acted an exorcist, as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. As evening drew near, they brought many to Jesus who were possessed. He expelled the spirits with the word and healed all who were ill. Matthew 8:16. In medieval Europe, the Roman Church authorized certain priests to perform exorcisms. To this day, the Roman Church has not completely given up this practice, which in fact has seen a renaissance since the topic of exorcism was reintroduced into the seminary syllabus of the Vatican. The witch hunts of the 15th century, which spread from northern Italy via Switzerland throughout all of Europe, were a gruesomely perverted form of the belief in demonic possession. The Age of Enlightenment, which began in the 17th century, drained the collective swamp of hitherto dominant religious aberrations and taught man the virtue of rationality, the foundation of the scientific method. With its origins in pure reason, scientific investigation is definitely the method of choice for the inner path, the path of enlightenment. Ken Wilber, one of the great philosophers and consciousness researchers on the threshold of the 21st century, called man on the inner path, quotation, explorers in the laboratory of their own consciousness. They're able to pick up and follow the trail of their mind from the inside. yeah, so this is also making a reference to the old medieval concept of exorcism. Of course, expelling the false, the non-I, the mind, is not the same, is not exactly the same, but it has some similarities. I mean, the concept itself is not wrong. The misunderstandings of the medieval exorcisms point to a certain pre-rational way of thinking. The concept, if we see it in a neutral way, I have to say that the concept of possession, even in a very rational observation, is not completely false, you see. So even the wisdom teachings could use this concept that a human being is in a way possessed by an alien power inside, and this power is called the thinking mind. So the thinking mind is an entity that, according to inner teachers and according to the eternal wisdom teachings, this power does not truly and finally belong to the human being. Meaning it does not belong to the nature of the human being. It has been taken on, it has been adopted from other places, from outside, but it does not come really from the inside of the human being, not from the soul. But as a matter of fact, knowing that there is a power that has internally occupied the human soul, overlaying it, stamping something upon it which is not its own, is of great significance even for contemporary enlightened persons on the inner path, since, after all, it teaches the inner power to discern between what we call the soul, this is the true I, and that which rises up out of the depth of the soul, on the one hand side, and the thinking mind, what we call the adopted non-I, not I, and its horizontal conceptual worlds, which are not rooted in the inner depths because they have been adopted, unchecked, and imprinted. The Greek word karaxo signifies to imprint and to engrave, and is the source of the word character. So a person without character means a person free of imprint. A person without character lives in his soul. So this is definitely not the use of this term masses of people would use. You know, a person without character means, you know, a person that has not it's not a good person, you know, person without character. But you know, in a very more profound look, person without character means person with no imprint of mind. So this person without character would be a person that is completely identical with the soul. No imprint, no possession, no obsession. So up to here, we could make a gap and ask whether you, I mean, this is heavy stuff, you know.
I have a question.
What's the?
Thank you. So I would like to explore that question a little bit more, because it's, as you say, it's a provocative claim to say that a person without character is living in the soul. Because in one sense, we think of character as maybe a uniqueness or a not necessarily a personality, but something that is unique about us. And we also think of the soul as maybe a purer form of that uniqueness. So that's a common way of thinking of the soul. And yet there's a flavor in what you just said, that the soul is without characteristic or without imprinting. Now that's what I want to ask, is, are you saying that the soul is without characteristic, or is the soul without a certain kind of negative or mechanical characteristic imprinted upon it?
Well, during the lifetime of a human being, the mind is accumulating imprints, and these imprints happen in time. So the soul is not living in time. So as the soul is not living in time, no imprints happen. You see, the mind has an own life, calls it my life. I was born, I was a small child, and then certain traumas happened, you know, and my father and daddy, and he didn't love me, and all this kind of thing. And then this life stream is a concept of the mind. You know, outside of the mind, this life stream is not happening. This just didn't happen. So in the reality of the mind, it's real, and it happened. Future is going to happen. Past happened, and in this stream of time, imprints happen. These imprints form the character. So the way the term character is being used by the masses of people is actually false. They haven't really understood the difference between mind and soul. Because, as you say, characteristics imply a kind of uniqueness, of individuality. The soul, I mean, a human form is in itself, has a uniqueness without a mind creating uniqueness. I mean, the flavor of the soul through every human being is different. The soul is not different, but the flavor in which it manifests is different. But this flavor, you know, this flavor can change. I mean, I use your term, characteristics don't change, even if through a person, say, complete final realization of self happens. Some characteristics don't change. This means that even before enlightenment, before self-realization, certain typical characteristics which are dedicated to the soul, or which go back to the soul, they were there. So they are there before enlightenment, they are there during enlightenment, and they are there after enlightenment. while other characteristics, which are actually characteristics of the mind, they just dissipate. So a person through which complete realization happens, this person changes completely, you know. So it cannot be, if an old friend meets this person, he would not, I mean, it still looks same from outside, but it's a completely different person. Although, as I say, you know, some characteristics, they still endure, you know. So any other comments or?
Such as? What would be a characteristic that would stay?
Well, first of all, you know, the physical form stays. I mean, so if this physical form is male, the physical form won't change into female. This is a characteristic of the soul, and also certain kinds of behavior might stay. Certain ways of being. It could be a person that has, you know, the concept of yin and yang. So some persons naturally have more, we put it this in a very broad sense, have more yin flavors and qualities. It could be a male person, but a male person can have a strong female soul. And other persons, they have more, you know, yang qualities. So this could remain, but many kind of behaviors and feelings and thoughts are what in modern psychotherapy we would call neurotic. You know, neurotic just means that that it comes from the mind. the mind is in itself neurotic. I mean, it's you know, there is no un-neurotic mind in a final sense. The mind itself is a kind of neurosis, although I don't use this term because it comes from Freud, and he had still a much too materialistic sense of looking at the mind, because neuro means it comes from the nerves. It has nothing to do with the nerves, really, you know. So any other questions or comments on this stuff? Otherwise, I just continue reading. Yes, okay.
So
No, wait.
sorry. Thank you. Is there a part of the mind or aspects of the mind that are I and that are not I?
No, the mind, you see, from this very profound perspective, the what we call the thinking mind is just a synonym for the non or the not I. I don't know that this has been translated as not I, but I think this is a little strange, isn't it? Oh, Ivan. Ivan! You're responsible for this. Oh, I didn't know this. No. Never mind. I mean, the non-I or the not I, it's actually the same. No, the what we call the thinking mind, okay, is a synonym for the not I. And it is a conceptual bubble a person is living in. You know, so this person is living in ideas, and these ideas constitute the entity called the thinking mind. It's not relevant whether we're talking about good ideas or bad ideas, positive ideas or negative ideas. You see, an ordinary person believes that maybe the spiritual path is a path from getting from the negative side to the positive. The whole New Age concept has this limited understanding. Getting from the negative to the positive, and if everything is positive, then it's fine, and then there's eternal happiness. But this is really not the wisdom of the inner teachings. The thinking mind creates these polarities. And of course, it's of relative more happiness if you're not depressive, only negative thoughts and apocalyptic ideas. This is definitely, it's relatively more happy that if you're optimistic and having good ideas and everything will be fine and everything will have a good outcome, But this is only changing within the non-I from the one side to the other. So this is nothing to do with the soul or with the reality. Yes.
So, in your concept of the mind, mind does not equate with consciousness or with cosmic consciousness.
No. I mean, I know that in the English language, some teachers use the term the big mind. So the big mind is actually also a synonym maybe for the spirit. And so this is a different term we use in the English language. When I use the term mind in the English language, and also the term Geist, which also means ghost, as I said, in the German language, I usually mean the thinking mind. But yes, the big mind is the transcendence of the small mind, the thinking mind, the false, the non-I. So yes, the big the small mind can finally transcend into the big mind in a process of transformation within a human being. So do you still have a question? Wait a minute, you need the microphone.
I think there's some question left. I was thinking of I know they're just words, but I think it might be important. Soul, essence, and what in Buddhism is called mind, that it's definitely not the ordinary mind. It could be, it's more like being or existence. But originally my question was if you're equating, again, I know it's language, soul with essence, or essence would be more like the particularity that it's more imprinted in the soul. I think you might have used that term.
Yes, we don't want to get lost in words.
Right.
And of course, if you read spiritual texts from different cultures or different teachers, you always have to get clear what they might use different terms. For example, Almas, you might know Almas, American, teaching in America, well known here in America. He uses the term essence. Right. He does not use the term soul very often. So, but it's the same, essence and soul are just different terms for what in the Indian philosophy we call Atman. Yeah. So we don't want to get lost in words, but it's definitely good to have the understanding of what is meant.